All right, so joining me now is Gavriel Wilkins to discuss the NBA Finals and some of our favorite prospects in the NBA draft. How you doing today?
I'm doing good, Eamon. How you doing?
I'm thriving. Yeah, I'm happy to have you on the show. Should be a fun one. We're coming off just a absolutely crazy game 3 last night, so let's get into it. What stood out with this Pacers team in your mind, and what's your main takeaways from the finals so far, and why do you think they've been able to take a 2-1 lead?
Well, the biggest takeaway through the first three games of the NBA Finals for me is just the impressive play of Indiana's bench in two out of the first three games of this series. I was talking about it on my podcast, The New 24 with Torrance Stagger, which you can hear every Wednesday as we release new episodes on that day, about how they needed a little bit more juice on the offensive end going into game three. And I think they found it in the place that most people least expected it, but I knew it had to come from. And that was that bench unit led by Benedict Mathurin and TJ McConnell. I think Indiana got improvements from its stars, such as Halliburton, finished with a double double, had 22 points, 10 assists. Siakam also had a 20-point game. But it was Benedict Mathurin that proved to be the biggest difference maker, scoring a team high 27 points, knocking down 75% of his shots, getting to the basket. And the thing that impressed me the most about him is we know that he struggles navigating through the screens a lot on the defensive end, but we saw him hold his own on that end of the floor. And to be able to put up the most points off the bench in a finals game since his Arizona alumni brethren and Jason Terry did it in 2011, that was an impressive performance. And then TJ McConnell, man, being a pest on the defensive end like he's known to be, putting up 10 points, 5 assists, and 5 steals. He was huge. I think another thing that is kind of hurt Oklahoma City a little bit is Chet Holmgren and his inability to find consistent offensive flow. We've seen him put together two impressive first quarters, most notably in game two and game three, where he had 13 points on 4 or 5 shooting and he had 4 rebounds. But after that, he struggled and only scored 7 points on 2 of 10 for the rest of the night. But all in all, like I said, it's the play of the bench that's made this series. You even look at Oklahoma City, the one win that they had, it was courtesy of Aaron Wiggins and Alex Caruso managing to combine to score 38 points, hit 9 triples. We know SGA is going to be great, but they're going to need those bench players to be great as well. And like we were talking about prior to recording, the play defensively from the Indiana Pacers has been something to behold. Like Miles Turner, yes, he struggled offensively to find his footing, had a rough night. We found out later on that he was playing through an illness. But his defense in that fourth quarter against Chad Holmgren, I think it proved to be a vital difference in this game. And you could tell that those guys are feeding off the crowd in Indiana and have really managed to make this one hell of a series. And most notably, another thing too, they held SGA to under 30 points for the first time in this series. That's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you really nailed it. It does sort of come down to, in some ways, which bench can give you the most production, and so far that has been Indiana's. Especially game three, like you said, Mathurin was just incredible, scoring 27 points in 22 minutes, and then TJ McConnell was just an absolute spark plug off the bench. Grabbed a bunch of steals, made the right plays, passing the ball really well. So I think that was huge. And one thing, just in general, with this Pacers bench that really stands out is OKC. While they do have a great bench, a lot of their bench players are more so great defenders than natural scorers. You do see that with Aaron Wiggins being able to score at a high level in game two sometimes, and Isaiah Joe, if he can ever get going, is capable of providing that score and punch off the bench for them. But in general, Indiana's bench players are just a lot more of natural scorers. So I think that's one thing that has benefited them throughout the series. And then even going back to game one, Obi Toppin had a massive game off the bench, and that was huge in swaying it in Indiana's favor. So I think that's been huge. And then sort of like you mentioned with their defense, that's really impressed me because that's been sort of the one knock on this Pacers team is they're not great defensively necessarily, but they've really sort of dispelled that narrative, especially in game three. That defensive performance was super impressive. They were picking up Oklahoma City full court for a lot of the game, really pressuring them, forced them into a ton of bad turnovers, bad shots, especially down the stretch of the game. So that was super impressive. I think OKC for the last 6 minutes of the game didn't have a single made field goal, which is just super impressive to be able to lock them down like that. And they really, in some ways, did their best impersonation of the Thunder's defense. And they were forcing turnovers. They were playing super physical, and they really got the Thunder off their game. And that was just incredibly impressive. Especially when you look at it, they didn't necessarily contain the Thunder's 3-point shooters super well. The Thunder ended up shooting like 40 something percent from three, but they were still able to win the game by 9 points despite giving up a lot of threes and not making a ton of threes on the other end of the court, which has sort of been their bread and butter throughout the playoffs, has been really being able to knock down threes and move the ball super well. They were still moving the ball well, but the shots just weren't falling. So just being able to get a win like that when your offense isn't totally clicking was super impressive to me. And then going back to game one, it was more of that traditional game from the Pacers where they were pushing the pace really well. They were getting open shots. They were making those open shots and they were moving the ball. So what really stood out to me with this Pacers team is their ability to win in multiple ways, and that's something that has surprised me a little bit throughout the series. I did expect it to be competitive heading into it, but at the same time, I was not expecting Indiana to be up 2-1 after 3 games.
Well, the one thing about that game one is when you control it the way that Oklahoma City did for the majority of the game, and you force the Pacers into 25 turnovers, but you don't capitalize on the other end in transition, you leave the door open. And as you said, this Pacers team, a team that's able to win in a myriad of ways, showed you that they can make things happen on both ends of the floor in game one, just as much as they did in game three. One thing we saw them do when they committed a lot of those turnovers is they got back on defense very quickly. You know, a lot of times we always tell guys when they play the game of basketball, hey, you got to get back. And we tell these young kids that, but we don't always explain what that means. But if you watch the tape of game one and you see how quickly they got back on defense and they were able to get a lot of stops, which in turn allowed them to push the pace a little bit and find guys and drive and kick situations. And we saw Obi Toppin rise to the occasion in that game. I believe he had 17 points, hit 5 threes, became the first Pacers player since Reggie Miller to hit 5 threes or more in the finals game. So, like, when they able to do that, hey, anything can happen. And this Pacers team has yet to be down in any single series throughout these playoffs. It's a testament to their resiliency. We talk about how Oklahoma City has yet to lose back-to-back games in these playoffs. Same applies to the Indiana Pacers. And oh, by the way, they broke their game three drought. You know, they lost game three in every single series up until this point, but not last night when, Benedict Mathurin and Tyrese Halliburton and those guys stepped up to the plate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think that's a great point, especially about how the Pacers were able to overcome those turnovers in game one by getting back on defense. I think that was huge. Just looking back to that game a little bit, I think they had like 18 turnovers in the first half or something crazy like
Sure
that, but they
did.
were still only down single digits at halftime. And then second half they came out, they took care of the ball much better, and they were able to really mount a comeback, including being down 14 points in the fourth quarter. And ultimately, they won off that crazy shot by Halliburton, but it was a really good team effort overall. It was super impressive for them to win that game despite the turnovers, but like you said, they did a really good job of making sure those turnovers weren't capitalized on. So I thought that was huge. And then just in general, they didn't have a player notch over 20 points in that game. So that just shows the collective team effort. Nemhart was huge. Siakam was really massive. And then obviously Halliburton hit that big shot. Obi Toppin, as we mentioned earlier, also had a huge game for them off the bench. So I think that's another thing that really stands out with this Pacers team is just a collective team effort every game. I feel like that's one thing that's really stuck in my mind. Looking at some of the stats earlier this morning, I noticed that the Pacers have 100 more passes than the Thunder this series, slightly over 100 actually. So that's something that really is just a testament to their ball movement and how well their offense works. I think that's benefited them throughout the playoffs, but that's been really on full display throughout the finals. And I think the Thunder's offense to me has looked a little bit stagnant and a little bit predictable at times, whereas the Pacers they just have so many options and they're just constantly generating great looks through their ball movement. So that's another thing that's stood out in my mind.
Yeah, and you talk about the stagnant offense, right? Of Oklahoma City. I think a lot of that has to do with the starting five lineup change that Mark Dagnall introduced to us in game one. You know, all postseason long, we saw Oklahoma City roll out the double big lineup with Chad Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. I know I've been very critical of Isaiah Hartenstein in some instances. I'm not being aggressive and looking to find his shot. But you know what Hartenstein is great at doing is setting screens and rolling to the rim. Something that Chad Holmgren, who isn't as built as Hartenstein is sometimes reluctant to do, and he's more of a pick and pop guy. I think when Hartenstein is out there, he allows the offense to flow much better. Whether that's with setting the screens that he sets, rolling to the rim. And the beautiful thing is, even sometimes when he's not looking for a shot and he's rolling to the rim, he's such a great asset when it comes to making the right reads and finding an open man to where he's a difference maker. Even when he's not scoring, you look up and you will see him with maybe 5 assists. He's also rebounding at a high level on both ends of the ball. You see him with 10 plus rebounds. I really wonder whether or not if Mark Daigneault is going to go back to his double big lineup, considering where his team is currently right now. Because Kassan Wallace love his game when he's on, but there are some times, at least in game 3, where he looked a step slow defensively to me, and there were times where he was getting beat. And also, he's not as big, when they get a mismatch and Siakam draws him in the post, that's like shooting over a chair for him. So, like when I look at Oklahoma City, they might have to bring that double big lineup back, especially when I believe they've been +8 with the double big lineup in this series. And we saw in the second quarter of game 2 when they played in a little mini spurt for an extended period of time and Turner went to the bench. That's really when they went on their run and we saw a Thunder blowout in that.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was something that was sort of on my list to bring up, and yeah, I completely agree with you. I think it was sort of a puzzling decision to change the lineup in game one. You're almost playing to the Pacers' game in some ways, as you're going a
Mm-hmm.
little bit smaller. When the Pacers, they don't have great size by any means, so I thought that was a little bit of an odd move. And yeah, like you said, the double big lineup has been effective in the limited time it's been used this series. Looked it up earlier. They have a +33 net rated in just 10 minutes together this series. Whereas for the previous series, they played 10 minutes per game at least together and obviously started. I don't know if it's necessarily that they change the starting lineup and go back to the double bigs, but I think it's something that you absolutely have to see more of. I would probably change the starting lineup, go back to what's worked with the double bigs, but I don't think it's necessary. I just think it's necessary that you get those two on the court together more because, like you said, there's just so many benefits to it. And I think Hartenstein's super underrated just as a playmaker, whether it's what
Yeah,
he does as a screener or just as a passer. He's a really underrated passer, and I think he really opens up the game for them in a lot of ways. We've also seen throughout the series their points in the paint have been a little bit down. And I think just employing that would help a little bit more. I will say in terms of Keeson Wallace, one interesting stat that I looked up this morning: Halliburton shooting 80% against him. So I think
mm-hmm.
the theory with starting Wallace instead of Hartenstein is just have more defenders to throw at Halliburton, but that really hasn't worked because he's been able to really attack Wallace in some ways, and he's seen a lot of success against him. And then, as you mentioned, Siakam has abused him on some of those mismatches. So I really just don't think it's worked as well. Maybe Dagnall, or a supporter of this idea, would say if Hartenstein's on the court, that's more of a target for him to attack. And just because Hartenstein's a little slower, he could get them on the mismatches. But at the same time, I do think there's so many advantages to just having those two bigs out there. I think rebounded wise, physicality wise, helps open up the offense a little bit, playmaking. So yeah, I feel like they do have to look at using that a little bit more next game. And I think it's also interesting, even game two, I remember they first used it with just Thomas Bryant on the floor, and I'm not really so sure why they're so reluctant to use it against Turner and Siakam. Do you have
Me
any
either.
sort of thoughts on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I don't understand that either. And I think you make a great point. We know and we understand why Mark Daigneault wanted to take Hartenstein off the floor because he did look at that as a matchup in which Halliburton can attack. But like we've always said, in our conversations talking about it through the finals on Twitter and whatnot, is when it comes to Halliburton's game, as great as he is, he's not really known as a guy that's like a master in isolation. And he's more of a guy that is capable of getting his shot off when it's set or like off the pull up or whatever. Like he's not somebody that you just look at and expect to just cook somebody one on one in the manner of a James Harden or whatever. But I don't understand why they gone away from it. And maybe they don't have to switch the starting lineup, but like you said, they have to play Hardenstein and Holmgren together. And I wonder a little bit as to whether or not those two not being on the floor together has impacted their rhythm on some level because they've been used to playing with one another all season long, despite both of them dealing with some injuries in the early going. Like we know Hardenstein missed the early part of the season. We know Holmgren went down on Veterans Day with his hip injury. But ever since those two have been inserted in the lineup, they played beside one another and they played rather well. And I think the size is the one big advantage that the Thunder have. However, they're not utilizing it to their advantage. And I think that may be a large part as to why they're down 2-1 just as much as their inability to get like 9 or 10 guys involved on a bench. Because see, the thing about the Pacers, when you shorten your rotation up against them and you only play like 7 guys or 8 guys, it's tough. You know, you kind of got to have like a hockey style like rotation to compete against this team. We even saw with the Knicks when Tom Thibodeau, before he got fired, expanded his rotation that, they started to make some runs and they made it a little bit of a series. Will Mark Dagnall seek to do that? Because this Pacer squad is 10 deep.
Yeah, no, 100%. You really do have to match their depth, and I think that's something that was really on full display last game. Throughout the game, especially just at the end of the game in the fourth quarter, the Thunder just seemed exhausted, and I think that's just because the Pacers they're able to go so deep, and they really, no pun intended, they tend to push the pace really well, and they just have so many options that can score, like we discussed before. I think that really tires teams out, and then as physical as they were playing on defense, they were trapping at times, they were picking up full court that really tires a team out. And I think that was on full display last game. And I definitely agree. Dagnall does have to expand his rotation a little bit, or not even necessarily expand it, just play some guys on the bench a little bit more. Just looking at their minutes right now, Aaron Wiggins had 10 minutes after just a monster game two where he scored 20 points. I know he couldn't really get going. He didn't score. He was 0 for 2 from the field in his 10 minutes. But at the same time, I'd like to see him get a little bit more of an opportunity. And you never know. He could end up get going. He's just one of those types of players. So I feel like it's a little bit questionable why he only played 10 minutes. And then Isaiah Joe had 4 minutes, but he was able to hit two threes in those 4 minutes. So I'm not sure why he didn't get closer to like 10 or 15 minutes, especially because that's sort of what the Thunder have done throughout the season is really play a deep rotation. So that's a little bit confusing to me on why he's gone away from that. You look at just Pacers players, nobody exceeded, other than Halliburton, nobody exceeded 35 minutes. Whereas the Thunder, five players played 35 minutes or more. So I think that's sort of a difference there, just as we were talking about, just with the styles of play and the coaching there a little bit is different. Then Hartenstein, as we discussed, we both think he's super valuable. He only played 18 minutes, which I think is a little
Right.
bit too low for him. His season average is closer to 25, even in the playoffs. He's been maintaining that level. So I think they need to get Hartenstein a little bit more minutes out there. Even with Chet struggling a little bit in the second half, he still played double the minutes that Hartenstein did. So that's just a little bit concerning to me. I do think with Chet, sort of a combination of the Thunder aren't really utilizing him right, and he is struggling a little bit with the Pacers' physicality. I think he's struggling with Turner. We saw that a lot, specifically in the fourth quarter. Turner had some monster plays on him, and he does need to get stronger. He's very young, so he can improve in that regard. But at the same time, I do think the Thunder they're utilizing him a little bit too much on the perimeter when he's struggling from three. I think they could utilize him a little bit more as a screener, as a cutter, and that's really where we saw in the first quarter. And the few points that he did score outside of that first quarter, it was either on cuts, on putbacks, on screens, stuff like that. It wasn't him shooting the ball. So I feel like they could just utilize him a little bit differently. What do you think of that?
I think they can as well, but I think a lot of that is due to the Thunder's offense getting stagnant throughout various stretches. And like you said, when you're playing your starters, all your starters played 35 minutes or more, with the exception of Case and Wallace, who only played 24. Like, if you're gonna play your starters that many minutes against Indiana, you're playing into their hand. But I think this is a growing experience for Chad Holmgren. And he's gonna have to grow up quick, of course. But no matter how this finals ends up, I think this is an experience that he'll be able to learn from and put in his memory bank. And yeah, like when you're going up against a guy like Miles Turner, you're gonna have to be a little bit physical with him. You're gonna have to bang. But yeah, they could get him involved a lot more. And Chet Holmgren, I've said it all season long alongside of my co-host Torrance Stagg on the new 24. Chet Holmgren is the most important piece for this Thunder team in order to win the championship. And he's to them on a lot of levels what Evan Mobley is to the Cavs. They need him to be that anchor defensively, and they also need him to be that guy on the offensive end. But yeah, like moving the ball, I think will help with a lot of that. And you bring up a great point. When he did score in the third quarter, it was off the ball when he was seeking the cut. Like we saw that dive. that he made when Jalen Williams hit him with a nice pass inside the lane. They're gonna need more of that. And they're gonna need Jalen Williams to be consistent as well. Like we saw him have 26 on 9 for 18 shooting. That's got to continue. So they're gonna need not only Chet Holmgren, but Jalen Williams to be consistent night in, night out alongside of SGA, who we know is their best player, is gonna give him a chance. But yeah, they could get him involved a lot more, but he's also gotta be aggressive and understand when it's time to attack and strike and score.
Yeah, no, 100%. I do think it's sort of that balance of getting him involved, but also Chet himself being more aggressive and figuring out the right spot to be in, things of that nature. Like we said, he's pretty young, so he definitely has time to develop. And I really like that Mobley comp just because they're two-way value, and then sometimes you kind of want more from them offensively. So I do think they're pretty similar in that way. And yeah, I agree. I mean, Jalen Williams really, really solid game last night. I think he'll need to continue that. Shea, he has been playing very well throughout the finals. I will say I wasn't the biggest fan of this game three. He had a lot of really bad passes, turnovers, struggled to take care of the ball, and overall, I think Andrew Nemhart's just done an exceptional job defending him. I didn't think he would do this well. I thought Nemhart would be the primary defender on him, but I also thought they were going to have to mix it up a little bit more. But Nemhart's really held up super well. He's holding Shea to below 40% from the field, which is just incredible.
I didn't
Being
even
able
know
to
that.
being able to hold the MVP to that low of a percentage from the field, and he's really been making life difficult for him. So I think that's been a huge factor in the series, even though he has been able to put up huge numbers, especially in the first two games. There was times second game he was awesome. So not really talking about the second game. That
Right.
was really incredible. One of the better performances of the entire playoffs, and one of the better finals performances, honestly, of all time. So not talking about that second game as much, but the first game, even though he did score a ton, there was a lot of points where he was sort of struggling, and it wasn't the most efficient. 35 points, I think, is what he ended up with, and I think that's credit to Nemhart for just making life really difficult on him. What role have you seen from Nemhart in this finals, and then just overall this team? Because I think he's just been so crucial.
Man, Andrew Nemhart is the the biggest difference maker, especially defensively. With the pressure that he's able to apply on the opposing guard, 94 feet, it's nonstop. We seen him do it the last 2 years against Jalen Brunson when they went head to head against the New York Knicks, and he's come out valiantly on both of those matchups. And you see him going against his fellow countryman in SGA, a guy that he has a relationship with, and they go back, and you could tell that they've competed against one another. He's looking forward to that challenge. I think Andrew Nemhart has done an exceptional job all playoffs long, not just on SGA, on all of the guards that he's defended. I think Aaron Neesmith has been solid as well, but Andrew Nemhart, when they were able to get him back in the fold alongside of Neesmith at the top of the year, that's when things started to turn around for this Pacers team. Because as we know, they struggled out the gate, and there was a lot of questions about them. We wondered whether or not they could get back to Eastern Conference Finals and so forth, but they was able to silence us in that end. And people forget this is the second best team in the NBA win percentage wise since January 1st. Only OKC has been better. You seeing the top two teams in these finals, but Andrew Nemhart, man, has been amazing at the point of attack. And just when you able to keep that pressure on a guy, man, and make him turn each and every way, that makes a guy tired over the course of a game. And that's why you see guys like SGA struggling against him, or maybe that's why you see those numbers that you do where he's not shooting at a higher clip as you would typically see him or expect him to against another defender out there in the league.
Yeah, for sure. He's just been so important to the team, and I like that you brought up that stat about the Pacers being the second best team in the league since the turn of the calendar. I think that's important to know that this run isn't really out of nowhere, despite them being a four seed. I mean, it is in many ways, but when you look at just how good they've been since January 1st, like you said, it is not as surprising, and they just have such a well balanced and complete team. And Nemhart's just a massive part of that. And yeah, he's been massive. I think he's also really provided a ton of value offensively as a shot creator when need be. We saw that a lot in game one when Halliburton was kind of struggling. Nemhart
Yeah.
really kept the offense afloat, and he was able to create shots. His play makes at a high level. He's shooting the ball at a really high level, especially in the playoffs. It's crazy how high his percentages rise in the playoffs, and he is just one of those classic playoff risers and just really an essential glue guy to this team. Just incredible two-way value, and yeah, he's been definitely one of my favorite players to watch in the playoffs. So I just wanted to give him a shout out there. I think he's been awesome.
And I'm glad you brought up the offensive end. Because in game one, as much as I gave Obi Toppin a lot of credit, he deserves a lot of credit as well. Because a lot of his creation, it wasn't just all catch and shoot. You know, you saw him hit a step back three and stuff like that. For a guy that wasn't really known to be an elite level defender, when I saw him during his days in college at Gonzaga, he's really turned it up on that end of the floor. And he's looking like one of those guys where sometimes you watch me, you like, I wonder how he would look on another team. You know, if he was a number two option here or there, you know, he had the chance to really rock out a little bit more with the ball. He's been great on both ends of the floor, not just defensively, but like you said, offensively. And I think it's just a testament to the way in which the Pacers like to play. And that 5-out style is proven to be very essential in today's league if you really want to win a championship.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I like how you brought up how he would do on a different team. I do think it's worth noting that he is sort of young enough to where I think it's possible where he does make some sort of jump. I don't know how high, maybe an all-star level jump, borderline that range. I could see him maybe having almost like a Derek White type of jump where all of a sudden he has a season
I
where he
like that.
averages like 17, 18 a game and he's always this guy an all-star, borderline those stocks. So I think there's still room for him to grow a little bit. So that's one thing to note with his game. Another guy I wanted to bring up quickly is Pascal Siakam. I don't think we've talked about him enough. I think he's just so underrated with this team. He just consistency is just what he does so well. I feel like he's just consistently bringing scoring value to this team, rebounding the ball really well. He can play make if need be. He defends multiple positions. I feel like he's become one of the more underrated players in the league. I'm so happy that he got the Finals MVP in the Eastern Conference Finals just to really give him his flowers. I think Halliburton had a strong case as well. I was a little bit surprised he didn't get it, but at the same time, Siakam's just been so valuable. I'm happy he got his praise because I feel like he's sort of underrated when discussing best players in the league, things of that nature, and then even a little bit underrated when discussing this Pacers team. He's just really essential to their success as well.
Yeah, Pascal Siakam is a guy that is easy to overlook. No pun intended on his game. We know he's an unselfish guy. We know he's a guy that's gonna do the dirty work, get things done on both sides of the basketball. But I think his unselfishness a lot of times is why we oftentimes overlook him. But on these stages is where he shines the most, especially when he's aggressive. And when you see him shooting at a high clip, taking advantage of the smaller mismatches that he has, getting that turnaround fadeaway shot off on a defender and, you know, swishing it, that's what makes the difference. And Pascal's a very important piece. I think when Pascal Siakam arrived in Indianapolis, that's really when we saw this team start to take off. And you even saw their defense start to slowly improve. And I give a shout out to the assistant coach, Jenny Bouchek, as well as Gennaro Pargo, a Chicago native who played in the league for many years as assistant coach under Rick Carlisle. Really trusting these guys to, you know, put him in positions to succeed. And I think why he works out so well that when you playing with a guy like Tyrese Halliburton, who likes to push it, get it up and go, and you a guy like Pascal, you athletic, like to run, get out and transition and score, it's gonna make you look good. And Pascal has a great resume, and if he would happen to win in Indiana, man, to be able to deliver a championship, the first championship to two different franchises, that's pretty cool to put on your resume. And I think that's gonna help him long term when you start to like weigh his career and you wonder whether or not he's a Hall of Famer. That's something you gotta talk about. Like if he happens to lead this team to finals alongside of Halliburton, that's two rings in two markets where the thought of them winning a championship prior to his arrival would have been slim to none. We know Kawhi was a big factor as well in Toronto, but to be in with the Pacers, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think those are some great points there. I think Siakam really is a sneaky Hall of Famer. He's not necessarily a guy many people might think of, but I think he does have a Hall of Fame trajectory at this point. And yeah, if he's able to win with both franchises, that would be just incredible. And I think, sort of like you mentioned about him being unselfish, I think this team really embodies the characteristics of their stars, where both Halliburton and Siakam are super unselfish. Miles Turner as well, probably their third best player, very unselfish. So I think they really are able to set the tone for this team and really set the culture there. So I think that's massive. And then Halliburton's been awesome throughout the playoffs. Obviously, I think we've talked about him a decent amount, but a really awesome game three, just all around impact. How he's able to impact the game with his passing, regardless of how his offensive game, how he is as a scorer. Obviously, there's those stats going around about the Pacers. I think they're like 20-1 or something when he scores 20-10, something along those lines. So yeah, obviously the impact's there, but I feel like he impacts the game regardless of if he's scoring at a high level. Just with his playmaking, he's probably the best passer in the league. I think that's a massive part of his impact. And then last game, he was really active on the boards, and I thought he had some really good defensive moments, which really hasn't necessarily been his forte throughout his career. But he's impressed me in the finals and really throughout this playoffs with how well he's competed on that end of the floor.
Yeah, Tyrese Halliburton, man, what he did defensively in game three, I hope that doesn't go overlooked because as great as he was offensively, going from the second quarter onward, defensively, he made some plays that we typically have not been accustomed to see him making in the NBA. It was times where you could question his effort, a lot of times. But last night, rather, was not one of those nights at all. You couldn't question his effort whatsoever. But Benedict Mathurin too, man. You know, I've always said it for the longest period of time. I've always felt like in order for the Indiana Pacers to truly win a championship or get to that level, it was gonna rely on his shoulder. As great as Halliburton is, and we know Halliburton is the engine that makes the offense go, what Benedict Mathurin is able to do on the wing as a scorer, getting to it in isolation. Those are the type of baskets that they're gonna need when things get tough against this Thunder defense that's gonna be stifling. And sometimes they're gonna force the ball in your third option's hand or fourth option's hand, depending on who's out there on the floor. And he got to make something shake. And Benedict Mathurin did that, man. And hopefully he can continue to build off of that because it's games like that why you wonder why he was taken out of the starting lineup. Now, if you watch on a nightly basis, you understand why because it's a thing called consistency, right? And we know sometimes he could be hot and cold. Sometimes the defensive effort and intensity is not there. He gets in early foul trouble, like we saw in game two. When he's playing fundamentally sound ball on defensive end of the floor, and he's making shots, getting to the free throw line, attacking the rim, scoring on all three levels, it's a scary sight, for the opposition. And hopefully he can continue to do that because when I look at him, that's the guy that I look at. Like everybody says, well, who's a star, superstar? I don't really try to get caught up in that. But when I look at the guy on the floor for the Pacers, I see the double zero beside zero, and I'm like, I see that double zero guy, and I know that's a guy when he has it going can really make a vital difference.
Yeah, no, most definitely, and I think we really saw that in Game Three. He's just such a spark plug off the bench, and then, as you mentioned earlier, his defense was really stellar in Game Three, and he's able to provide a lot of energy there. But he was also really making the right reads on that end of the court in Game Three, which is something he has struggled a bit with throughout his career. But offensively, he's always there, and he's always going to be able to just score in bunches, really. So it's super impressive, especially considering he did struggle a little bit earlier in the playoffs, especially that New York series, and then he ended up coming alive in one of those games. And then ever since then, I feel like he's sort of been his normal self and he's provided them with really great offensive production. And I do think he's really the classic microwave guy off the bench in some ways. I feel like he's the perfect six man, especially for this team. Maybe in a different situation, he would be more of a starter, but for this team and what they need, I feel like he's the perfect six man off the bench, and he really does embody their style of play and their energy in just a lot of ways. So I feel like he's been awesome for sure. So that's definitely a good shout. And then Rick Carlisle, I feel like we did talk about Dagnall's coaching a little bit, but Carlisle's just been a mastermind to me, and I feel like he's really moving up the ranks of one of the best coaches of all time. You look at what he did over a decade ago with the 2011 Mavericks team, and then this team, the Pacers team, is very similar to them in some ways, just how they're able to overcome the odds and really potentially win another championship with just a unique style of play and really being able to beat teams that are on paper a little bit more talented than them. So I feel like that's just a testament to Carlisle, and he's really able to adapt his style of coaching depending on what the team needs. This Pacers team is very different than all of the Mavericks teams he's coached, and going back 20 or so years when he coached the Pacers before and when he coached the Pistons even before that, every team just is a little bit of a different style, and he's just sort of looks like he assesses what the team needs and he changes style to that, which I feel like is what most coaches should do. But it's just really incredible to see how much success he's had throughout his career.
It is, Rick Carlisle. I know he's been a successful coach, but there was a time where I was very often critical of Rick Carlisle. I didn't think he was always willing to hand over the keys to a young point guard. I think with Tyrese Halliburton, after the experience he went through with Luka Doncic in Dallas and Dennis Smith Jr. as well, he learned and he found a guy that he could trust. And once he gave him that nod of respect, things started to turn. He's always been a solid basketball mind, but to see him do it with a young group was something that if you had told me years ago what happened, I couldn't have saw that at all. But I think that's a credit to him, like you say, being a guy that's been willing to adapt and learn. And I think when he went through the situation with Jason Kidd in 2011, allowed them to play a free flowing brand of basketball, that kind of gave a preview to what we are seeing now. Didn't think about it like at that point because he's always been a guy that I saw as being controlling, clashed with a lot of guys early on in his career, whether that was his, like you said, his first in Indiana to when he was in Dallas, trying to make things go one way when it wasn't going over that way with the guys in the locker room. Man, for somebody that's had some rocky relationships with players in the past, to mend the fence like he has his second go round in Indiana is proved to be successful. And I got to give a lot of credit to the Indiana Pacers as an organization. This is an organization that has not had a top 5 draft pick since 1988. And they don't do anything but plug and play guys and draft well and develop well and make the right trades at the right time to acquire talent to keep a formidable roster together year in and year out. That's something that gets lost. A lot of times we look at the Pacers and we say, well, they're a 45 to 50 win team. They just a first round exit. They might get to second round one year, get to conference finals here and there, but they've been consistent. And they've been consistent when it comes to putting together winning rosters that's going to compete. And when you have a playoff run like this year where certain stars unfortunately go down like Jason Tatum, and we wish him well from his, recovery from Achilles injury. When you have that is an opportunity to make a run and you capitalize on it, you get situations such as what you're seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy you brought up the Pacers organization because I feel like they've just done a terrific job making trades, drafting the right players, just top to bottom. And yeah, shout out to Kevin Pritchard. I feel like he's definitely one of the more underrated GMs in basketball, and he definitely deserves a ton of praise for not just this season, but what he's built as a whole in Indiana. Yeah, before we sort of move on to our final thoughts about the finals, I just want to bring it back to the Thunder a little bit. We talked about going back to maybe the double big lineups, moving the ball a little bit more. What's the number one thing that you're looking for this team to really get back on track and ultimately win this series?
What I'm looking forward to with the Thunder is can they just get their offense, out of that stagnant, operation, and how do they manage the non-SGA minutes? Because I talked about Jalen Williams, how important he's going to be. He had 26 points on 50% shooting in game 3. They're going to need him to be that conductor and keep that offense going and steady when the minutes where he goes to sit on the bench. And if that can happen, I think they'll be fine. Like we said, the double big lineup that has to be brought back. I don't know how he'll manage his starting lineup. That's definitely going to be something that I'm looking to see, especially with his team down 2-1 with Mark Dagnall. But I just really think that, they got to make sure they win the non-SGA minutes, win the battle on the glass, and most importantly, maximize their strengths to their advantage, which is their size. And if they going to, continue to play defense the way that they have and force Indiana in the turnovers, I don't think they'll have too much to be worried about. I know they down 2-1, but this is a team that's been resilient all postseason long. I would expect no less from Oklahoma City in game 4.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I feel like you summed it up perfectly there. And yeah, I agree. I feel like they've been resilient throughout the playoffs, so I'm expecting them to bounce back again in game 4. But I really do think they, like we talked about, need to go back to the double bigs a little bit more. And really, like you said, I feel like it is important to get away from that stagnant offense and win that non SJ minutes. But also, when SJ is on the court, I'm really looking for him to get his teammates involved instead of a lot of the heavy isolation basketball, which he's done, especially last game. But game 2, you look back to how much success they had. SGA was not only looking to score, which he did on elite level. He had over 35 points that game, I believe. But he was also really getting his teammates involved, and he was playmaking at a high level, and that in turn opened up the game for some of his role players. which really allowed them to match the strength of this Indiana Pacers team, which is their depth and their ability to score in multiple ways. So I feel like that's going to be the number one thing, and the biggest thing for Shea going forward just needs to be looking to get his teammates involved as well as scoring at a high level. That's something that's going to be on my radar going forward throughout the series. Ultimately, before we move on to the draft, how do you see the rest of the series playing out? And going back to your original prediction, what did you predict a week ago when this series was started?
Well, before the series, I predicted the Thunder to win in 6 games. Definitely didn't see Indiana winning game 3. I definitely thought it would have been game 4. Still has a chance to be, but if it is under these circumstances, that changes a lot. But I had the Thunder in 6. I'm still sticking with my prediction. But I've been very impressed with Indiana. And the series has really gone exactly how I thought it would. I said it on my show, The New 24, alongside of Torrance Stagger, when we did our finals preview episode, and episode 30, that dropped week before this past week. I expected Indiana to go in there and win game 1. Because I know when, a series is starting and you have a team that's inexperienced, sometimes you play a little bit tight. Even when you have big leads, you're not in that position before. And I thought that experience proved to be the difference. Even though the Pacers are a young team, they got a guy in Rick Carlisle that's been there, done that, been on a final stage as a player as well as a coach. And then you have Pascal Siakam, who's been there and done that as well, dating back to his days with the Raptors. I thought that proved to be the biggest difference. But like the series is going exactly how I thought. But I still got the Thunder in 6 games. But like I said on the show, I would not be surprised if it went the other way around. I really think that we getting a beautiful brand of basketball from these two teams. And if you somebody that's really a hoops fan, you will appreciate this series, no matter what they talk about with the ratings or any of that, hoopla. You will really enjoy it. And I think it's been a good one through the first 3 games.
Yeah, for sure. I had the same prediction actually at the Thunder in 6. I might have to extend it to Thunder in 7. I feel like the Pacers have surprised me in a little bit of ways. I did think that they could steal that first game as well, so I was sort of on the same page with you there. But at the same time, I wasn't expecting their defense to be this good, and I also really wasn't expecting the lineup change for the Thunder. So I feel like that just
Yeah,
changed things a little bit, and maybe it's also just prisoner of the moment, seeing how good they were in Game 3. But at the same time, I do think it's hard for me to imagine that they just end up losing 3 games in a row. I feel like they're bound to steal one and then force a game 7, which would be actually the first time since the 2016 finals we get one.
I
So
know.
maybe I'm just optimistically hoping for that. But at the same time, I do still have to roll with the Thunder. We praise the Pacers a lot, and they're an awesome team, and it would be great if they won. I personally rooting for them to win. But at the same, this Thunder team is a 68 win team for a reason. They have an elite defense, and I feel like they're going to be able to get back on track throughout the rest of the series. So I'm still sticking with the Thunder, but a little bit considering the Pacers, and I definitely think they have a better chance than I considered last week, even though I did give them a decent shot to win this finals.
I get it. Trust me, I get it. And I said it on my show. I think it would be really cool if Indiana was able to pull it out and win. And it's gonna be one of those series. It's been a back and forth slugfest. Like you look at game 1 and you look at the Pacers like, hey, you get game 2, might make this thing really interesting. But you know who they going up against. Then you see Oklahoma City respond the way that they have. And you like, whoa, I don't know now. Like, can this Pacers team stay on the floor with them? This is my thing. If games are going into the fourth quarter and it's like 5 points or less going one way or the other, I think I trust the Pacers. If it's a blowout, like if OKC's up by 10, 15 going into the fourth quarter, I'm leaning with the Thunder. It's just one of those type of series. Pacers have been the best clutch team all playoffs. Thunder, they the team that, they like a fighter. They like to knock guys out. They got that one hitter quitter that if they knock you out with it, if you're not able to respond and get back up, it's gonna be a long night for you. If you keep those games close, if you're Indiana, you're gonna have a chance most nights.
No, I think that's a great point right there. And it does remind me a little bit of the Thunder Nuggets series that we saw earlier, where the games the Thunder won, they really just hit them with the knockout punch. They just sort of laid the hammer and blew them out. But when it got into those close games, the Nuggets did seem to have a big advantage there. So I think that's an important factor to note. But at the same time, with this Pacers team, they've been able to come back throughout the playoffs in so many different games, including Game 1 of the finals, to where it makes it a little bit tough, and I could really see the
Yeah,
Pacers pulling it off here. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, I feel like we're just getting an awesome finals. I think that's something we definitely have to appreciate after last two finals. I mean, I'm a Celtics fan, so I thoroughly enjoyed it last year.
I'm
But
sure you
last two,
did.
it was a great time. Missing it a little bit, but last 2 years, objectively, like basketball wise, we didn't get great finals matchups, and I feel like this finals has the potential to be the best finals of the decade so far. I did really enjoy that 2021 finals, Bucks and Suns. I feel like that gets overlooked a little bit, but had some awesome moments. Most of the games were super close, but this really does have potential to be the best finals we've had since 2016. I feel like just with Game One, the crazy comeback, the Halliburton game winner, just a really classic moment there. It's had those big moments, it's had those close games, and I feel like that's sort of poised to continue. So, what do you make of that? And do you see this as one of the best finals of the decade, if not the best?
Right now, it has a very strong case. We haven't really had too many special finals in this decade. Like you said, outside of um the finals between the Suns and the Bucks, you really haven't had one. I mean, I thought Warriors and Celtics was good in 2022, but it kind of left a damper taste in my mouth because I felt like the more experienced team won. I just didn't feel like the best team won. But I thought a lot of that had to do with, it was Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum's first time in that NBA final. And after years and years of trying to get there, sometimes you got to learn the hard way. And eventually, they was able to rebound from that 2 years later and win. But yeah, right now, I would say this definitely has a chance. And if you get 7 games, it's definitely up there. Not even just off the 7 games factor, but just the back and forths and the twists and turns in this series. You can ask a myriad of questions on both sides as to how things have gone a certain way, or why did this happen? Why did that happen? You could also, look at the bench and the swings. Like the Pacers bench was plus 31 over OKC in game 3. Whereas I believe the Thunder's bench was a plus 10 or plus 11 over Indiana's bench in game 2. And we know the Pacers bench outscored the Thunder's bench in game 1. Like, it's been so many twists and turns. Like, right now, I would say it's been the best finals of the decade.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like you said, there's just been so many twists and turns and so many unpredictable moments throughout the series, and there's been so many big moments. I feel like that's an important factor when sort of ranking and considering what's a great finals. It's how many big moments were there, how many iconic plays were there, things of that nature, and that's one reason why I think the 2021 finals is a little bit underrated when you think about Giannis had a 50-point game in Game 6 to secure the title for the Bucks. The Bucks came down from down 2-0 in that series, which I think a lot of people
Hmm.
forget about. Giannis's block, the Drew Holiday steal. There's just so many moments that you can look back on. And you're like, damn, that actually was a very iconic moment. That was a historic performance in many ways, and I feel like this series has the potential to be just that.
Oh, yeah, man. Like I say, NBA fans getting a special treat. Don't worry about the ratings talk. No, none of that. I mean, of course, it's great to see the finals decal back on the floor, give it that mystique feel, and presentation is always important. But if you really just want to, focus and lock in on the basketball, you're getting a hell of a series right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The gradings talk is just ridiculous to me. It's like, why would I care what the gradings are? I'm enjoying the
I'm with
product.
you.
I don't work
I'm
for
with
the
you.
league. Like, who gives a shit?
Right.
Like,
Yep. That you sound like my man Torrance, my co-host on the new 24. We've been saying it the whole nine, man. We do not care about those ratings. You know, I love to grow the game and see the game grow, and having these conversations. I believe like we have, and that's gonna help the game grow even more. But yeah, like I don't focus on the ratings talk, but even the small market talk, none of that. Like these are the best two teams, or have been the best two teams in the NBA since New Year's Day, and you getting it on center stage, in June at the NBA Finals, and this is what you want to see. At the end of the day, hey, it doesn't matter what markets they are. The fan bases, that's cool to have, but I think it's a lot on the line. And like you said, you seeing a lot of crazy moments in this series, like Tyrese Halliburton hitting that game winner. I didn't think that was gonna happen at all. Like in a one-on-one situation, I'm not used to seeing him create off the dribble like that. He hit some shots last night. Was like, hey, for a dude with a set shot, you kind of can get your shot off a little bit in a one-on-one situation. I didn't know that. Like if I was playing against them or something, I'd be like, hey, respect.
Yeah, no, exactly. I feel like you really nailed it there. And yeah, this was a great talk about the finals. We're going to move on to some draft conversations. But yeah, I think we really hit on every angle there. Yeah, been an awesome finals so far. Super excited to see how the rest of it plays out.